So once the surrogate has passed the medical clearance at the fertility clinic and both the intended parents and surrogate have passed their psychological evaluations, now the parties can move forward to the legal clearance phase. So in this set of slides, I'll talk about all the components involved in the legal clearance aspect of a surrogacy journey. So lawyers are required for two important aspects of the surrogacy journey. Lawyers need to be involved in putting together the surrogate and intended parent contract, which is item 1. And lawyers need to be involved for the pre or post-birth orders for the baby, which is item 2. Item 1 is the one that must be completed before any embryo transfer can be scheduled with the fertility clinic. And item 2 is completed only after a successful pregnancy has ensued and is close to the baby due date. Item 1 is the surrogate-IP intended parent contract, and this usually starts happening after the surrogate has been medically cleared by the fertility clinic. Now, it is possible to set up the contracts before the surrogate passes the medical clearance, but there is a chance that the surrogate won't pass the medical clearance and that the intended parents will have paid for the lawyers in setting up the contract for no reason. So it's a little bit risky, and it depends on what you are willing to accept. But generally, what we see is that the legal clearance happens after the medical clearance. It's important to know that intended parents and surrogates are represented by different lawyers to reduce conflict of interest, and intended parents should look for a lawyer who specializes in surrogacy contracts and who understands the laws in the state where the surrogate lives. The state where the surrogate lives determines the rules that you need to follow. So the lawyer needs to understand the laws in which the surrogate lives in order to help the intended parents set up the contract. If the surrogate does not have a lawyer in mind for herself, in general what happens is that the intended parent's lawyers will suggest someone. They will suggest someone that they have dealt with in the past and have a good relationship with. So what is this contract and what does it look like? Well, in general, the intended parent lawyers will start with a boilerplate surrogacy contract, and then they will insert some of the IP's preferences, requests, and requirements. Then the IP lawyer will send this contract to the surrogate's lawyer, and each side goes back and forth until both parties are satisfied with the contract. As you can imagine, this part of the process can take either a really short time or a really long time. Timing on this process not only depends on the IP and surrogate's preferences and requirements, but also depends on the lawyer and what the lawyer has on their plate. So on average, this contract phase takes about 6 weeks. And from personal experience and from talking to dozens of IPs and surrogates, this is the most frustrating part of the process. It seems very simple, everybody's on board, yet it still takes 6 weeks to complete, and there's no embryo transfer that can be scheduled until the documents are signed. So it's a source of a lot of frustration. So it's important to prepare yourself for this part. On average, the cost is about $2,750 for the representation on the intended parent side, and then about $1,500 for the representation on the surrogate side. The surrogates pay for nothing. The IPs are responsible for both of these payments. So after item 1 is completed and the contract has been signed, the embryo transfer can move forward and the pregnancy can hopefully ensue. Item 2, where you establish the legal parentage of the child, does not happen until way later in the process, somewhere in the second trimester if there's a successful pregnancy. So if there's a successful pregnancy with the surrogate, a judgment must be made at state courts declaring the intended parents as the lawful parents of the child. These judgments can occur either before the birth of the baby, so these would be called pre-birth orders, or they can happen after the birth of the baby, which is a post-birth order, and this depends on the state where the surrogate lives. Some states make this easier to handle than others. California is known for being fairly easy on this, whereas other states like Michigan basically make this impossible. So compensated surrogacy is illegal in Michigan. Lawyers handle all of the filing to the state courts, and intended parents pay for this, and they should estimate around $3,500 for this process.